Alright, so I guess we're going to make a couple of wands here. I got all my stuff here. These are the flashlights, the two variations, and I'll show you how I use both of them. Acrylic rod, not exactly the clear 1/4 inch stuff that I recommended earlier, but these will work. 2-part clear epoxy, it's important that it's clear. Aluminum tape, some hemp twine and super glue, popsicle sticks, sandpaper, clippers, scissors. I'm going to use the mat to measure the lengths. I didn't actually know that you could get mini mag lights in various colors. I got it in blue, so maybe you could do like a Patronus wand, but you can get red and green. So if you wanted to do like a Avada Kedavra or Expelliarmus wand, you can do that also, which strangely enough, since we got some green acrylic, we can make this one a Death Eater, so that comes up as a green light. So for the Avada Kedavra spell, which is green. The acrylic is green. It's different from the clear. The clear will actually project the light the best, but the green will still work. The wider the diameter, the more light that will project. So this will actually be pretty bright. Coupled with the blue, it'll be really, really bright. So this is the Rayovac flashlight. It's not as bright as the mag lights, but they're easier to work with because they're a little bit more streamlined. There's this little divot at the tip there where you can sort of seat the acrylic rod a little bit better, and it'll hold it in place a tiny bit better when you're gluing it down, but for the most part it works just fine. The switch is on the butt, and I kind of like it in a place where, like, if you're going to hold it normally, like as if that was the grip, then with the mag light, it's in a place where you don't have to hit the butt down. We'll have to cut the clip off, but that's part of the process. So, okay, let's fix the length on these things. For the mini mag light, first of all, we want this to be pretty short, and let's go with like 9 3/4 or 9.5-ish, just because the less material that you have to pass the light through, the more will actually go in and come out the tip. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.5. Let's make this 9.5. So right here, I'll just take the clippers. This part we can sort of set aside for later, and now we have pretty short wand, but again, it'll be nice and bright when we're done with it. So this one, the Death Eater wand, will make a little bit longer, and this will be like 13 or 14-ish. And I kind of want to bend this one so that it'll actually appear a little bit shorter. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 and a half. I'll make this one pretty long. And, oh, we measured the wrong end. Look at that. One of these ends is actually cut already, so it's kind of gross. The other one is still a factory chopped edge, and it's still pretty clean. And it doesn't matter as much since you're using clear resin, but I want to make sure that we get the factory edge first, because it's a little bit cleaner cut than I can do with a pair of clippers. So let's try it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 and a half. So right about there is where we'll cut it. This little bit we'll set off to the side also, and yeah, just about 13 and a half. So next thing we want to do is diffuse the tip, and that's using the sandpaper here. All we're going to do really is sand off the edge and the tip so that there's maybe like 3/8 of an inch, 1/2 inch left, so that it's hazy, and we want it hazy so that the light can project through. The way it is right now is that the light does pass through it, and you can see it at the tip there, but that's because it's already hazy. It doesn't really come out the sides very well, so you want to make sure that it's hazy so that the tip will show a little bit better. For the most part, all it is really just sanding it and kind of making it look like a tip also, so we're going to round it off. Okay, that's pretty good. How does this look? It'll light up. That's the important thing. So again, the Rayovac is not anywhere near as bright as the Maglite, but we make do. So on to the clear. pretty dang good. With the clear, you can see that it actually comes out the sides a little bit more, but that's also because it's really bright. But the tip is the most important part. Now we're going to prep the flashlights. All we're going to do is just clip this clip off. I have no idea where that went. And using the sandpaper, we'll just sand this down a little bit more. That's pretty good. It doesn't have to be perfect since you're going to be covering everything with aluminum tape. I happen to have a spare end cap for one of these mini mag lights, and I just glued like a little wood ball to it. So that's what's going to end up being the end here. For the most part, that's really all I'm going to do to these two flashlights is cut that off and then maybe add this little piece right here. Not maybe, I'm going to add this little piece right here. So we can start gluing the stuff together now. I've got my 2-part epoxy here and a little tray so that we can mix it up. Take equal parts. Start mixing them together. Alright, get the flashlights. Funny thing with this aluminum tape is you kind of have to be a little bit delicate with it, careful so that it doesn't stick to itself. And kind of use the stickiness to sort of hold the rod in place. We'll get a little bit on the tip here first, but to hold it in place, we'll put more in here in a second, but for that purpose, we'll do this, and then we'll get a couple of popsicle sticks just to keep it level with itself. And then take some more and just sort of glop it in here all together. Just realize that this is kind of far off camera and you can't see it, but sorry, you get what I'm saying. So once that's more or less glopped together, then you can wrap it around so that its shape will be determined, and you want it to be kind of a little conical shape right here. And also this is where you would make sure that it's straight. So just look down to see if it's crooked or whatnot. And point it down, and since it's aluminum you can sort of mold it, but this is where you're going to check, you know, look at it down, look at it on the sides just to make sure that it's straight. This one I'm not too concerned with because it's going to be curved, and we'll fix that later. But for this one, we'll have to make sure that it's nice and straight. Side. It's already starting to kick, so that I'm going to do this a little bit faster next time because it's only 5-minute epoxy, and it's been a couple of minutes already, so I didn't think that all the way through. Sure it's straight. Straight enough. Alright, so we're going to give that a little bit longer to cure, like maybe 20 minutes. Okay, so it's been about half hour, and I think this is pretty much dry. You can check by looking at the leftovers and stuff and see if it's actually cured and hardened, which it has. So checking just to make sure it's nice and solid. I mean, not putting too much pressure on it, but enough so that you can check to see if it's going to hold, and it does. And we're also going to bolster the junction there also with some tape, but for the most part, it's effectively glued. So we're actually going to bend this one, and after I clean this little bit up right here, I have a heat gun, and we'll hit it with some heat and then bend it into a reasonable shape. So really all I'm doing is taking the sticky part and then wrapping it back on top of itself and then smashing it down. What we're going to do later is we're going to take like a popsicle stick and then smooth everything down. Okay, so we have a little heat gun right here. So we'll just hit it with some heat and then bend it into a kind of a natural shape. So okay, so now it's starting to bend on its own, which means you can tell that it's actually ready. So we'll give it a little bit like that and let it cool for a second. It doesn't take long. Acrylic holds heat pretty well, but at the same time it doesn't take a whole lot to cool it back down so that it'll hold its shape. Alright, so that, we're going to bend that, and then we'll bend up here a little bit. What I'm doing right now is I'm looking down just to make sure that the tip ends up being where I want it to be, which is where it would ordinarily have been if it were straight, albeit back a little bit. But just because there's a bend doesn't mean it's going to be totally crooked. It just means there's a bend in it. So alright, so there you have a crooked wand. Alright, clean this one up a little bit. And this is where we can start kind of bunching it up and making it look really messy looking. The secret to getting it to look natural, as in like made out of tree bark or some other natural material, is to clump up the aluminum foil so that it's not going on smooth, it's going on really kind of gross looking like that. And what you're going to do afterwards is take one of the popsicle sticks and smooth it down. So all I'm doing is just making sure that all of those ridges are pushed down so that it's still relatively smooth, but there's lots of contour in there, and it's hard to tell because it's reflecting all over the place, but we'll get to that in a second. I'm looking at it to my face, but totally out of frame. Anyway, you want to make sure that you're identifying where the seam is for the separation of the actual flashlight, because you're going to have to cut those parts later so that it'll still move and you're not completely just covered up. So, all right, now we're going to start building up the texture and giving it the contours and all that other stuff. We already started by bending it so that it's kind of wonky looking, but at the same time it's still relatively straight. But I'm going to take the aluminum tape and start wrapping it around the whole thing, leaving the tip exposed. A couple of things to note is that the junction right here is still relatively hard junction. You can see the edge, and we want to make sure that this is covered up, or at least faded. So we're going to put a little bit more here so that it's a gradual tapering down. We want to make sure that it's looking natural, like a tree branch or a stick or something like that. So First, we're gonna just cover everything really, really messy, sloppily. So, starting right here, we'll just put some down, and again, you kind of have to deliberately smash this stuff together. And zoom in a little bit so that you can see it. You want to deliberately make it all messy. So what I'm doing right here is introducing wrinkles and creases. And I mean, there's some smooth spots, but the messier you make it, the more natural it's going to look a little bit later. Right here, so wrinkling it to make it look messy and gross. Bending it, and then smashing it down, bending, smashing it down, bending and smashing it down. I don't know that's a mantra for bend it and smash it down, but it sounds kind of dirty and wholly funny. I'm going to take the pommel off of this one just so that we can keep it all nice and neat. The junction, that is. The rest of it's going to look really messy and gross and awesome. Okay, so look at this. It looks like tin foil that you basically just curled up and balled up, but it looks terrible, but it's fixed when you start taking the popsicle stick or whatever and smashing it all down. And it goes from being all gross and bumpy looking to relatively smooth, but with lots and lots of natural texture to it. And see, I don't know if that really appears, but it's less bumpy and angly and stuff, but it's starting to look a little bit more natural stick-like. And we'll clean up the edges here, but the important thing is just make sure that you give it its due course as far as smoothing everything down so that it does look like, you know, natural wood. I mean, that sounds kind of silly now that I'm actually saying it out loud, is that you're going to take like tin foil, wrap it around a metal flashlight and some acrylic rod, and it's supposed to look like wood. Does not compute. Alright, so all we're going to do now is just keep building up the layers of tape. Fortunately, the aluminum tape sticks to itself pretty darn well, so all you got to do is just keep building it up. Move it all down. When you're doing that, you can see where the crease is, and again, don't cover that up too much because you're going to have to cut it later. You don't have to be too delicate with it. I mean, you're smashing it down, and that requires at least a little bit of force, but if you're just running the stick over it, it's not actually going to smash it down properly, so you want to give it a little bit of weight to it, but make sure that you're not putting too much pressure in the wrong place, because you want to make sure that this junction right here doesn't break. But it's pretty solid, but again, you don't want to deliberately test it. So I just cut the slack off of that so that we can tell where the end is a little bit easier without having to I just stopped talking. I wonder where my train of thought went. Now we're going to put some tape on the pommel here. So we'll screw that down, make sure the junction is clean, and pull some of that stuff back. Good thing about this is that it's kind of naturally going to crumple and crinkle in weird places, so we can just sort of work with that. And all I'm doing is just smashing it down to make sure all the sticky bits are on the insides, and you don't necessarily need to get full coverage of the entire thing. I mean, it helps, but it's not a requirement. Just making sure that I get all these bumps smoothed down. You're gonna be able to tell that there's gonna be ridges and stuff that still have air in them, and just give those a nice little smash down too. And just for the shit of it, I'm gonna take some hemp twine and then glue some hemp twine down. There. You know, it's not a good day crafting if you don't get at least some super glue stuck to your fingers. And then all we're going to do with this is put some more tape over it. And since it's kind of a thin strip, we don't need too much, so I'll just rip this in half. Set some stuff later, and then continue to be all messy. That's, by the way, what the hemp twine is for, to give a little bit of extra contour underneath the tape. So we'll take this and wrap it around this to kind of look like Hermione's wand, like a vine wrapped around it. That look pretty good? Yeah, that looks pretty good. I can't really tell. You'll see it a little bit better when we start priming it, but yeah. For the most part, I'd say that's not bad. Okay, so from here, we got to go back to where our seam lines were, and we got to break through that. And that was right about there. All I'm doing is just using the sharp edge of the scissors to break through the foil so I can actually use this like it was meant to be. Boo bam. Was that it? That wasn't quite it. That's okay. The alternative is to, of course, use like an actual razor blade or an X-Acto knife, but the scissors are right here and they work just fine. Alright, let's check it. Ooh, it works. Yay. Very bright. Alright, let's move on to this one. We'll put a little bump right here to kind of make it look like there was the spot that was supposed to come off to the side, but it was cut. So we'll just take like a scrap piece from over here and then crumple it up into a little booger, and then sort of add it over here. Just, I mean, we're still going to cover it again with this, but for right now it kind of looks like it's supposed to have branched off, but it was cut somewhere along the way. The good thing about this stuff is that it's very fluid as far as design-wise, so you can always change the design as you're going, and if you want to add, you know, some extra bumps somewhere else along the way, you can do that too, but There's an old saying that at a certain point in your project, you stop applying design and the thing itself starts telling you what it wants to look like. And that right there was kind of a good example of that, how like it just sort of felt like it should have been appropriate there. So we put them there. Alright, so that's good enough as far as the kind of tapering contour to make it stick-like. Actually, I just realized that I don't even know if this looks okay. Can you tell that it's on? It's so dim. You can barely tell that it's on. That's pretty sad. So, note to self, don't use the green stuff anymore. And lastly, we're gonna get some hemp twine here, and we'll wrap this around so that it looks like a little vine. And just to get a rough estimate on how much we're gonna need, I'll stop about there. Of course I glued myself to it. The hard part is seeing where the glue is, because it's all reflective everywhere. To stop it, we'll just sort of we'll fray that out a little bit so that it'll lay down flat. And then put some more glue right there. And glue my finger to it. And so now there's a vine that wraps around it. Now we gotta cover it with tape. And just for emphasis, I'll say one more time, it doesn't matter how gross you put it on to begin with, since when you smash it down with the popsicle stick, again, it went back to looking all stupid and lumpy, but when you smash it all down, all is forgiven. All right, you totally can't see what's going on there, so hopefully once we get primer on it, you'll see a little bit better. But for the most part, this is what the two wands are going to look like. Zoom out. This one is going to be a Patronus wand that lights up blue. And this will be a Death Eater wand that supposedly lights up green, but that's pretty sad. So I guess the next step here is prep it for painting, which means covering the tip, and I think that's it, just covering the tip. Just got some masking tape here. You don't want to cover up any of the foil, because that means you're probably going to not paint on it. So if anything, you want to leave a little bit of the acrylic showing so that you know that all of the silver parts are covered. Here's the wands that are hanging off of the tape on a hanger, and all I'm going to do is hang this up in my garage and let them dangle while I spray it. Yeah, so I just did a function check and they still work. One thing of note on these is that the contact points for the metal on metal, you don't want to paint over those, just word to the wise. So we got black, brown, white. I think I'll give it a base coat of brown, and then dry brush on some highlights, and we'll see where it goes from there. So one thing that you actually need if you're going to paint something, which I do not have right now, are brushes. So I'm using a stipple brush, and I prefer using stipple brushes specifically because when we deliberately made all of those wrinkles and texturing and stuff, you got to make sure that you're getting in between and that you're filling in all the gaps. So one way to do that is just stab it repeatedly. It looks really dark in the lighting that I have right now, but it's not too bad. It's very specifically a dark chocolate color, but still very brown. All right, cover your ears. So one thing I just realized is that with the camera on, it's kind of like somebody watching you, and all of a sudden this task seems really, really boring. Usually when I do this, I just sort of let my mind wander, but now that I'm very aware of the fact that there's quote-unquote someone watching me, it's kind of like, do I talk? What do I do? Do I tell an amusing anecdote, or once I finish this one, I'll stand this one up and then I'll finish that one, and thus begins the cycle of watching paint dry. It's awesome. It's not awesome. Can be awesome. It's not always awesome. Hopefully now, though, you can see a little bit more of the shape a little bit better. Now that it's darker, the vine stands out a little bit more. Same thing with the little broken off branch part. Oh, maybe I can put something there to make it look like it's still kind of a exposed wood from where that branch broke off. Or not. I mean, that might be kind of silly considering this is supposed to be a finished wand. Cover thine ears. Alright, so I'm going to take this outside and hit it with a clear coat so that we can seal in the base coat. Next I'm going to hit it with a dry brush, possibly a darker wash, but yeah. So I got a layer of clear coat on it now, and now we're going to dry brush it. Adding just a hint of black so that we can get a gray. Black goes a long way, obviously, as you see here. I'm sure everybody is familiar with the concept of dry brushing, but just as a review, you get some paint on the brush and then basically wipe most of it off so that when you go over it, all you're doing is you're getting those high spots, and that is entirely too much. Just taking a wet paper towel to get some of the heavier handed dry brushing. Acrylic is water based, so it comes up with water, but I put entirely too much on there. So let's try this again, but we'll wipe a little bit more off before we hit it. So let's try the handle here. Much better. You see how subtle that is? I don't know if you can tell, but it's incredibly subtle. Okay, so hopefully you can see those highlight spots now a wee bit better. Basically the gist of it, so that it looks a little bit more naturally bark-like. Alright, moving on. Maybe I want this one to look a little different. Let's try a black wash on this one. This is just water, so that when it mixes together, it basically just dilutes the black so that it runs a little bit better. And what I'm going to do with this is I'll slather it all over the wand and then wipe it off right away. And then I'll go over it with the highlight. Tightening these down so it doesn't actually leak in. Alright, let's see if you can tell the difference on camera. It's a little bit darker. It's got some stuff in the cracks. but mostly it's just a to darken it a little bit. Well, it's mostly to get inside the cracks, but the side effect is that it darkens it. Alright, so yeah, on camera you can't tell that there's any bit of difference, but we're moving on. Alright, so this dry brush is going much better. I'm going with the length of it as far as brushing it on. If you go across, you're going to pull or apply too much. Okay, so looks like that's it for this one. I am going to put them back up and then do another clear coat. Otherwise, that's about it. That accent wasn't supposed to mimic anyone in particular, just being goofy. My map was in my head. I was alone for 3 days in the dark. That was actually supposed to be Connery. Back from the garage, they're drying now. I'm going to start pulling the tape off. Not that it's going to be that big of a surprise, seeing as how the majority of it has already been exposed, but either way, you can still get the pleasure of demasking. Let's put the battery back in so you can see the super dim light. I'm sure the bending has also dampened it, but at least you can see that it lights up now. There's literally no projection whatsoever, but at least it's something. So if this is used to kill you, it won't kill you too hard. Oh, no. Ooh, look at that. So much brighter. Okay, so for all intents and purposes, these are done. So there you go. It's very obvious differences between them as far as brightness, but again, this is made just for demonstration purposes, not necessarily for fun and to have them, but I mean, it was fun, but yeah. Anyway, so that's it, and we'll see you later.